So you want to start a podcast? Today we're going to tell you some of the things to do as well as what not to do to make your podcast startup go smoothly. Welcome to Purgatory. What's going on, freaks and freakettes? I'm Spike.
And I'm Matt.
Thanks so much for tuning in again. Make sure to check us out on all major podcast platforms. Drop us a like on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Purgatory Podcast pretty much everywhere. Send us an email at officialpurgatorypodcast@gmail.com because we love to hear from our listeners. Comment on any of the YouTube videos we're putting out. We're putting out clips now, which is cool. Nice little 4 to 8 minute bites of the podcast, easier to consume for people is what we're finding out. So that's cool. Leave us a comment. We're replying to pretty much all of them at this point, and we like to hear from our listeners. So what's going on today, Madman? How you doing?
Pretty good, man. We got a good podcast ahead of us. Kind of like just the shortcuts, what we did wrong and what we did right, and what's going to help you guys, start a podcast successfully. Yeah,
and I would like to preface this by saying this isn't like step by step on how to become Joe Rogan,
Yeah, exactly.
This is just how to get your podcast on the airwaves, because we ourselves are working on building an audience and we're still trying to figure that part out, but we do know how to get a podcast up because we've got coming up on 25 episodes now. So we've made some mistakes and we've done a few things right that we want to share with people,
Yeah.
I fucking ripped down some trim off of one of my windows and retrimmed it, and it looks really good.
Mm-hmm.
That's boring as hell though, right?
It's boring, but like if you've done this before, you know how satisfying that is.
It really is. It's like the drink that you have right after you just build something out of wood is like the most satisfying drink of all time,
Yeah.
Because I ripped down this existing trim and I recalked the window, and then I took just regular like 1x4s. I didn't use trim like normal window trim. I used 1x4s and I table sawed them all down, and I made the windowsill, and I fucking painted them white, and I put it up, and it looks fucking beautiful. And my wife was like, "Oh, it looks really good. You should do that to every fucking window in the house." And I'm like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have like 12 more windows to do. Damn. So I made her a deal. I'm gonna do like 1 or 2 a month. Like in a year we'll be done.
Oh, I have kind of like a story, I guess. So I like to use Facebook Marketplace. You've heard of this?
Oh yeah, we get all kinds of stuff on Facebook Marketplace.
It's a lot better than like Craigslist because like you can see the person's profile. They don't look sketchy.
For sure.
So I was on there, and this guy had posted a picture of like this like man and lady, and I was like, oh, they look familiar. And he was like, oh, like do not work for these people. They don't pay you. Like he was like, they called me for a job. I went there. They had me work for like several weeks, and then they just never paid me. Oh, and I was like, what the hell? I was like, where do I know these people from? And it's like, I'm going through Facebook, like just regular Facebook, and my friend posts a picture of him and his parents. And it's my friend's parents.
Oh man.
Yeah, isn't that like that's what
that
like, I don't
sucks.
know. I mean, like.
So now, like, you can't look at them the same. Like.
Well, I mean, it's all hearsay. You know what I mean? Who knows what happened? You know what I mean? Because I'm sure if I asked them, they would say something along the lines of like, oh, like he was drunk on the job. You know what I mean? There could have been some.
He came in and clogged our toilet.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't know.
Every day.
I don't want to point any fingers, but Yeah, I thought it was weird. Because you always see those ads if you use Marketplace. People are always like, oh, like this guy didn't show up on time. He completely just ghosted me. Or like this guy haggled me for prices and then just never showed up.
If you're going to get a contractor to do work on your house, make sure that they're not the ones that want payment up front. Because if you pay them up front, they'll come in and like throw a nail on the floor once a week and then not do the work.
Yeah, and then you'll never see them again, and they won't pick up your phone calls.
You got to make sure they're like licensed and bonded and that whole insured and all that stuff. Don't get like under the table work done on your fucking house, especially if it's electrical or plumbing or something like that.
Yeah.
Like you don't want some guy that doesn't know what he's doing wiring in your house and burning your house down,
Yeah.
Or some guy that is like, oh, I can do that plumbing way cheaper. You know, like a licensed and bonded guy gives you a quote for like $1,000, and then your neighbor's like, I'll do it for 100. Like, I'm gonna pay the 1,000. I
Yeah.
don't need my freaking sewage backing up into my bedroom.
Hmm.
You know, just take the hit on stuff like that. That's my dad moment of the day. Just take the hit. It's plumbing and electrical, drywall, trim, shit like that, all day
Yeah.
long. I'll do that myself, but I'm not gonna do wiring or piping, dude. No way. Oh, that reminds me of a story. At the first house we bought, there was a really crappy like fluorescent light fixture in the kitchen. And
Yeah.
I was in the kitchen one day, and my son was like still in a bouncer. Like he couldn't walk yet. He was really tiny. And he was rolling his bouncer around the kitchen. And I'm like, all right, we're going to go eat now. And I put him in his high chair, which was in the living room. And as soon as I took him out of his bouncer in the kitchen and put him in his high chair in the living room, that whole light fixture fell out of the ceiling and smashed on the ground.
Oh, wow.
He could have been in there. It could have fallen on my kid, you know?
Yeah.
So I kind of like take some deep breaths, and I'm like, okay, whew, like thank my lucky stars that didn't fall on my child. And so my wife and I were talking about putting up a fixture in there anyway, a different fixture, because we didn't like the fluorescent light. And you know how when you turn on fluorescent lights, it'll sometimes like hum, and
Hmm.
it's really annoying. So we go and get this new fixture, but I pull down the light fixture, the old light fixture, the rest of the way because there were still some like wires attached,
Yeah.
and it's like this janky old wiring, and it's got like hay in it.
What the
It
hell?
looked like there had been mice in the attic, and they had built a nest in this light fixture. And there weren't any pests in there anymore, but I mean, it was a relatively old house, so they might have been there at one point. And so I start getting in there and cutting wires, and I'm like, yeah, I can do this. It's only like 3 wires, right? Red, blue, and a ground. We're good. So I start cutting wires, and I cut one, and all the lights for our bedrooms go out.
Oh, shit.
And I was like, no, I can still do this, right? So then I keep cutting, and I'm like, I'm so stupid that I didn't turn off the fuse box. So then I cut, and I
Oh.
cut one of the live wires, and I'm like, so then I step down off of the stool that I was on, and I like lean against the wall, and like I'm still like halfway getting shocked for some like residual shock in my muscles, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm like, we're calling an electrician.
Damn.
So I get the guy in there, and he's like, yeah, dude, you could have totally done way more damage, or you could have like really messed yourself up. You should have called me. And he was like $100 an hour, his fee, but it was a minimum of 1 hour, and he was only at our house for like 25 minutes. So it was $100, wham bam. He got all the wiring done, and he was like, I don't even want to hang this fixture. You can probably do it yourself. So just put those wires on these wires, and you're good to go. Give me $100. So it was $100, no big deal. I should have just paid it in the first place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I shocked the shit out of myself because I just had metal pliers, and I grabbed that wire, and I was like,
That's all it takes, like that one shock when you're like, oh, nope, yep.
yeah, I'm
we're
done. We're done. Yeah, I went from like home improvement guy, you know, I'm
Yeah,
like,
to like
nah.
suburban dad.
Like, nah, honey, I can do it, you know.
Yeah.
And then I was like, no, fuck this. We're calling a pro.
Yeah.
Well, anywho, we're almost 10 minutes in, and we haven't started on the topic, so let's roll.
Yeah, brother.
So today we're going to talk about podcast startup, and specifically the nuts and bolts of it. No, like we're not going to be like, find your niche and blah, blah, blah. Like we're not going to talk about hocus pocus shit. We're going to talk about what does it take to get your voice on the internet. You know what I mean? And that's what that's what I want to see. It's like don't tell me how the cake is made. Just show me the cake. Or
Mhm.
maybe that's a bad analogy, but like just tell me how to do it. Stop, you know what I mean? Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm doing what I don't like, and I'm beating around the bush. So number one, and this is kind of what I said, but not really. You got to determine what is your podcast about, and what is your content going to be. What is your genre? Are you going to have a co-host? Things like that. And it's kind of hypocritical for me to say because our podcast is basically just rambling.
Mhm.
We talk about whatever, but the dynamic is it's Spike and Mad, you know.
Yeah.
Like if you listen to Howard Stern, it's like, well, what is his show really about? It's just him being crazy. And
Mhm.
Our show is Spike and Mad talking about stuff that we find interesting and or funny. You
Yeah.
know?
I was gonna say like, okay, with the co-host thing, it's like I know people out there who have like big enough personalities where they can hold down a podcast by themselves. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
if you're not that way, I would recommend getting a co-host because I think me and Spike could easily hold a podcast ourselves. But our idea came from we would like sit in the office together and just like ramble on about random things. So we said let's just start recording that kind of stuff. Um, but I think I think that's where I would start first. Is like, can I
Yes.
hold it myself? And if I can't hold it myself, try to find a friend. And then when it comes to like finding a friend, you need to find someone that's gonna like be about it. You know what I mean? You can't have like that one friend that's like, oh yeah, I'll record on Monday, and then you call him on Monday, he's like hungover. You know?
Or they ghost.
Yeah.
You got to have somebody that's accountable and
Mm-hmm.
is going to be professional.
You just gotta make sure you find someone that like also finds this kind of interesting.
Well, there's great podcasts with one person. I mean, the Bill Burr Monday Morning Podcast is
Mm-hmm.
awesome. Chris D'Elia's podcast is great. It's just kind of parroting what you said. If you can hold it down yourself, that's fantastic. And make sure you've got enough of like a good enough dynamic or a good enough topic that you can give good content. Like if you've got something that should be a 10-minute podcast, don't record for an hour.
Yeah.
So I've heard of there's podcasts about literally anything you can imagine, you know.
Yeah.
And I've seen some that are like so ridiculously specific that there's so little content. Like you could cover the entire topic in one episode, you know.
Yeah.
So then what are you talking about for 40 episodes? So make sure that your genre or whatever you're doing is something that you can continue to do. Like a lot of talk shows that have become very, very popular over the past few years, well, even maybe decades, all the way back to like Rush Limbaugh, is political commentary because it's always fresh content. You know, people can
Mm-hmm.
always talk about what's happening in Washington, blah, blah, blah. Sports is always fresh content. You can always talk about new stuff. And that's what I like about us is we aren't specific to anything. Like we've talked about boxing, we've talked about YouTube, we've talked about gaming, we've talked about all these different things. We're not pigeonholing ourselves into one very specific niche, you know? So a lot of
Yeah.
people on YouTube, if you type in like how to start a podcast or how to make your podcast grow, which we have done because we're trying to do that, every fucking video is like, find your niche, be very, very specific. And I'm like, I mean, I get that, but if everyone is trying to find their niche, then there's no outliers. Maybe you need
Yeah.
to be an outlier. Maybe you need to be like H3H3 or Logan Paul or Joe Rogan and talk to everyone about everything, you know?
Yeah. Like when you look up how to make a podcast on YouTube, what they think and what they make videos about is how to be successful on a podcast. You know what I mean? They kind of want you to do what like they've seen other successful people do before, where we're more teaching you like just literally how to make a podcast. You know what I mean? How to get it up and running.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
as opposed to like how to get like views. You know what I mean? Like that stuff comes later. Like they treat that as step one when step one should really be like what equipment to use and like what like kind of software to use.
Well, I agree with you in that you should know, like, this is the nuts and bolts of getting it on, the logistics of it, but you should also have a rough concept. You shouldn't just go into it and be like, all right, now what's our podcast about? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you should already know that going into episode 1, you know.
Yeah.
A mistake that I think we made was we kind of launched too early in that we recorded episode 1, posted episode 1,
Yeah.
you know. I feel like you should have 3 to 5 episodes banked, and then when you launch, you should launch all 3 to 5 at once, so that people can watch 4 or 5 episodes in a row if they want to, you know.
Yeah. We have this as a topic at the end, but one thing that I was seeing people say as well is a lot of people who, because I follow like the podcast subreddit, and they said what they did was before they made a podcast, they made a social media. So they made like a YouTube, they made like a Twitter and an Instagram, and they would like put their logo up, and they would say like they would make a countdown pretty much, you know what I mean, like 1 day to go, you know what I mean, and like like an hour to go, and they would like release a trailer on YouTube, so they kind of build up hype for it, you know what I mean, and
I
then
get that. Yeah.
They follow other people that follow podcasts already, and then they get the attention of other people. You know what I mean? Because they don't have an episode out yet, but people are gonna be like, oh, like what are they gonna be about? So then
I
when they actually do officially launch, like they'll get a lot of views.
I like that, and I like that on paper. But
Yeah.
what bothers me about that is when they're like, click here to go to our website or whatever, and you click, and then it just says coming soon. I'm like, well, what
Yeah.
the fuck? Where is it? You know?
Hmm.
So I would rather like you could do both of what we just said. Like you could have 5 episodes banked, and you could build the hype so that when you launch, boom, there's 5 episodes. But don't launch and then have limited content. Like you want your people, especially if they're paying, like you want your people to be able to consume content immediately, you know?
Yeah.
So I think we're saying the same thing in a different way.
No, yeah, yeah. I'm just saying like what I've read online. You know what I mean? I'm not saying like, this is like a fact. I'm just saying like this is like another like helpful tip kind of thing.
Yeah, folk show. And this kind of brings us into my second talking point, which was frequency. And we've actually made some mistakes on frequency, and we're rethinking our upload frequency and our recording frequency. Is that at first it was like, okay, we're gonna do 1 video a week, and then we're like, I said, let's do 2 videos a week because it's twice as much content. We'll get twice as good, twice as fast, you know.
Yeah.
But then it became 2 hour-long podcasts a week in 2 people's lives that are working jobs, you know, and have lives other than that. It's hard to have good content for 2 episodes a week. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
If you're not like a full-time podcaster and that's not your job, you know. So what we've decided to do is we're going to go to 1 full episode a week and then release clips because the YouTube algorithm likes frequent uploads. But I think that the quality of the podcast is going to go up with only 1 podcast a week because we'll have that much more time to develop a good podcast, you know?
Yeah. We're both on the same frequency there.
Well, and some people could say, well, Joe Rogan uploads 5 days a week. I'm like, well, Joe Rogan is the biggest podcast in the world, and he has ridiculously interesting guests every day.
Yeah. I mean, he also had fame before the podcast. So he didn't start out podcasting. He was like a celebrity that said, okay, I'm going to start a podcast. So he already had like a following to go and listen to it.
Yeah. Which, I mean, if you have a following, great. There's a lot of YouTubers that are starting podcasts now. And I think people are seeing it as, you know how YouTubers, they were like, my main channel, and then, oh, I'm going to make a gaming channel too.
Yeah.
And then someone decided, let's do merch too.
Hmm.
And then now it's every YouTuber starting a podcast. So it's just becoming like another avenue of like a way to diversify. You
Yeah.
know?
I mean, it's extra income. You know what I mean? They already have the following, so why not?
Yeah. And it's smart for them. Like if you have a following somewhere, you should try to double your money. And like you have X amount of followers on Instagram, you should try to be like, hey, subscribe my YouTube or follow me on Twitter or whatever, you know? And it's weird because podcasting is one of the oldest platforms out of all of them, but it seems to have been slept on for years.
Oh, yeah.
You know? I don't know why, but it just has.
Yeah, I mean, I used to remember like when I had like my first iPod Touch, and like you'd go to like the iTunes store, and it was like a podcast section. I was like, what the hell is this? You know what I mean? They just weren't. People didn't care about them. I guess it was like the best way to say it.
When you're a kid, you're not gonna sit down and listen to an hour-long podcast. You want the instant payoff of like a 3-minute song.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
But I mean also more like the fact that like no one really had podcasts out that I mean like no people had podcasts, but it was like the History Channel podcast. You know what I mean? There wasn't a podcast for every like genre, I guess was the best way to put it.
Yeah, I mean you can type in like how to walk your dog, and there's a whole bunch of podcasts on just walking dogs.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, for sure.
It's interesting. I don't know if that's good or bad. It just kind of is what it is. But yeah, figure out your frequency, figure out how your length too. Like, are you going to have a 2-hour podcast? You're going to have a 10-minute podcast? Because there's very successful podcasts that are very short and very long, you know? So figure out how long you can carry an episode and stick to it and be consistent. Like if you have been doing hour-long podcasts for X amount of time, and then all of a sudden you cut your main episodes in half, people might be like, whoa, what the hell? you know. So pick a length. For us, it's about 50 minutes is what we've decided. And those are our main episodes. And then obviously we have clips that are kind of anywhere in, but like 4 to 8 minutes is what I try to keep the clips at, you know. But, and we're still learning this too, because we're pretty early in the process. But that brings me to one of the most important ones, I think, is equipment. And we could talk about this probably all day.
Yeah.
But the equipment it's important, but it's not so important that you should take out a second mortgage on your house to buy, you know.
Yeah.
You can get a good rig that's going to get you sounding good. Like, you're not going to sound like you're going to record a platinum album, you know, but you're going to sound pretty good. And like $150, I would say, is a really solid rig, you know. My setup, which we were talking about it we were talking about it the other day on how I think that Mad sounds better than me, but Mad was like, I always thought you sounded better than me. So it's really interesting, but like our setups are completely different. You're recording on the Blue Yeti, right?
Yeah.
And so the Blue Yeti is, if you don't know, is a USB all-in-one mic. You just plug it in the computer and it's ready. It's got a preamp in the mic. It's ready to go. But what's cool about the Blue Yeti is you can put it on different modes. Like, it'll record just out of one side or it'll record out of both sides. So you can record like an interview with the person sitting across the table from you, and it'll record out of both sides of the mic, which my mic doesn't do that. But Matt is locked in. Like, he can't upgrade that mic. He'll have to buy a new mic, you know?
Yeah.
My setup is a little bit different in that I have a preamp audio interface, and I have the Behringer UMC 202 HD. And it's, like I said, an audio interface with my headphones plugged into it. I've got gain knobs. I've got kind of all these different fucking buttons that I hardly don't even know what they do. But the reason I bought, there's a lower model that only has one XLR input, which would be for my microphone. And I have two XLR inputs so that I can plug a second mic in if I have a guest in person, which we've only had once. And we used a second mic, and it worked fine, which that was really cool. So I have the option of having plugging a second microphone into this audio interface. And also, the microphone I have is pretty cheap. It's really cheap, actually, because I spent my money on the audio interface, which was like $80-ish. And I decided to spend my money on the audio interface instead of the microphone, because if you put a great mic into a shitty audio interface, the great mic is going to be hindered by the audio interface. So I bought like a decent audio interface. It's nothing to write home about, but it's a solid one that I can always upgrade mics, and it will sound really good when I upgrade mics, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was a little bit nerdy and a little bit long-winded, but just figure out if you want to plug and play the way that Matt is doing. His voice sounds great. Or figure out if you want to have something that you can upgrade more and have a little bit more versatility with the audio interface the way that I'm doing. I don't really think there's a right or wrong answer. It's just what you want to do.
The most important thing I would say is just like kind of what you said. Don't go out and like max your credit card out and buy like the equipment that YouTubers are using. You know what I mean? Because of course they're gonna recommend what they can afford, and obviously they can afford it a lot better. But just like go on Craigslist, go on Facebook Marketplace, go on eBay, look for like a mic. You know what I mean? And it won't be too expensive. Just plug it into your computer and just try it out. Because let's say you do buy an expensive microphone and you try it out and you don't like it, you know what I mean? Then you're stuck with the microphone. So just make sure you try it out first, and if you like it, then go ahead and buy a better mic. But that's the most important thing, I think. Just make sure you don't overspend and then end up not liking podcasting. I guess it would make the best ways to sum it all up.
Yeah, and one of the best ways to do that is, I mean, use Amazon reviews, use YouTube, type in like best microphones under $100 or best podcast setup under $150, and you will see dozens of people that have started podcasts, and they will show you their setup, you know, and that's kind of what I did. And I kind of I was like, oh, I like that, but I don't like that. And I made my own setup that was unique to me, but I pieced it together out of everybody's videos, you know? Mm-hmm. So yeah, watch reviews, set a budget for yourself, stick to your budget. And I don't really. I think about $50 is the minimum because you can get like a blue snowflaker. I think what it's called.
Yeah.
That's probably the cheapest I would ever go is $50. And if you're on a budget, I don't think you need any more than $150.
But that's like I think that's like the most important point. Just like don't just because like I've known kids who like growing up they saw YouTubers, so like they pull out like a credit card and like bought like the best camera and like the best lighting. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and they're like,
And
why
like
don't I have 100,000 subs overnight?
yeah,
You know?
it's like you. I mean, you also hate to see someone like just throw money away like that. Oh yeah, and then I also bought like I guess like an arm for like my table
Yeah,
and
I
like
have
a
that
pop
too.
filter for like $15 on Amazon. Like really
Yeah.
easy.
Mhm.
That's like another thing I recommend. I think it really changes like the audio, you know, really like makes it a lot more clear, and it also just like makes my desk look a lot cooler, I think.
It makes your desk cleaner, your workflow's better. You can move the mic around easier
Hmm.
so that you're like cricking your neck or something like that. And also the arm reduces shock to the microphone so that like
Yeah.
if your phone goes off and it's sitting on the desk, you wouldn't hear it in the mic. It wouldn't rattle the mic as much as if the mic were just sitting on the desk. You know, it's
Hmm.
not perfect, but it's better. You know,
Yeah, it's definitely like an upgrade. It's like a minor upgrade. Um,
and it's cheap.
yeah, I mean like you just go on Amazon or eBay and like they're just like under $20 to get like a decent one. I mean you can of course go more expensive and
Yeah,
it's
you
gonna be
can buy like
better.
a carbon fiber crazy $200 one, which is like margin like slightly better. You know.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, like, that's what I'm using right now with, like you said, like a Blue Yeti mic. And I mean, this is what the quality sounds like, so that's pretty good. And you said your setup, but yeah, I mean, that's like that's gonna be one of the biggest decisions when you start a podcast is like one thing that me and Spike wanted to do was like in a couple months down the road we can like record in the same room.
The piece of equipment that I saw that I really want that is as much money as I would ever spend, and it's like everything you need to podcast in one thing is it's called the Rodecaster. Have you seen it? I
No,
sent it to you.
is
It
it
was a
made by Rode, like the Rode mics?
yes.
That's awesome.
It's it's called the Rodecaster, and if you look it up, it's ridiculous. It's really cool. It's got 4 inputs. It's got a Bluetooth function where you can put a phone to it, so you can have like a call-in line. You can be like, call now, and they call your phone, which is Bluetoothed into the Rodecaster, you know.
Hmm.
And it's got like the pads on it where you can program sounds, and you can like boing or whatever the fucking sound you want it to be. You
Oh
know,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's the whole nine for podcasting, and it records right onto an SD card. So
Dude, that's
you can
amazing.
take yeah, you can take out the SD card and you can put it in your computer or wherever, you know.
How much was
And
that? Do you
it
remember?
was like $700. It wasn't ridiculous, you know.
Yeah.
And then I'm really excited for the Rode Pod mic. It's this new podcasting mic that Rode is putting out, and it's only $100.
Hmm.
And it's supposed to be not quite as good as the Procaster, but like it's pretty close. I can't even hardly hear the difference between like $150 mic and $1,000 mic, you know.
Hmm. Yeah.
You probably have to have $1,000 headphones to hear the difference.
Yeah. What I was gonna say was like I'm like a Razer fanboy. So like I like the you know like the keyboard, the mouse pad.
Hmm.
Um, and like I was looking at like because they have a microphone too, and like I was looking at the reviews, and they were like, oh, like if you already have a Yeti, don't bother. You know what I mean? Like this is like the Yeti's already better than that one.
Right.
So like a lot of the mics that look cooler or like that you like, you might want to look at the reviews compared to like a cheaper microphone.
Yeah, I have a Behringer audio interface, and I was looking at the Behringer C something. It's about $100 microphone, and I was thinking, oh, Behringer, I have Behringer this, I have Behringer headphones. I mean, it would be cool to stick to the product line. And then I looked at the reviews for this Behringer, and it was like a 50-50 chance you're gonna get a shit one.
I
Like,
always, dude, I hate those. And like, you go like on Amazon, and like half of them are like, "Oh, this is amazing." The other half's like, "Dude, this was the worst part I've ever bought."
yeah, well, apparently this microphone was notorious for having product like manufacturer's defects.
Nice.
And people were like, yeah, I've sent it back in 3 times, got 3 different ones, and it's still shit. And I was
Damn.
like, holy fuck. You know, so yeah, read the reviews, use your Amazon reviews. Don't bankrupt yourself. But we got to go into a break, dude.
Nice.
And we'll see you guys on the other side. How's it going, everybody? This is Spike from the Purgatory Podcast. When Matt and I decided to start this podcast, neither one of us knew kind of where to start or how to distribute it to different platforms, and that's when we came across the Anchor app. Now, Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast because they give you everything you need in one place for free, which you can use right from your computer or your phone. Different creation tools allow you to record and edit your podcast so it sounds great, and this was the kicker for me. They'll distribute your podcast with no minimum listenership to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and several more. Now, there's really only one more thing left for you to do if you're looking to start a podcast, and that's get out your phone, open your laptop, download the Anchor app, and go to anchor.fm to get started. All right, Madman, welcome back from the break. Still there?
Hell yeah.
Good. Welcome back, freaks and freakettes. Beginning of the podcast, talk a little bit about getting your equipment in line to get your podcast out there. But I want to talk a little bit briefly. We're going to go under the recording platform, which is probably the number 2 most important thing. But briefly, I want to talk about music because the first couple episodes we did, I just went on Amazon and I looked at royalty-free music and I just ripped it down off Amazon and put it up. But it's not always royalty-free, just because it says royalty-free. Did I say Amazon? I meant YouTube.
Yeah, I was like, what? What are you talking about?
I went on, YouTube. I've just ripped it down off YouTube, and it's not always royalty-free, even if it says royalty-free. You know, because somebody could have just ripped it off of a video that was copyrighted and then reposted it and written royalty-free. And that's what happened to one of our earlier episodes, which is now I can't monetize it at all. So just be careful that you're using actually royalty-free music. So what I did is I just went on GarageBand and I just made some beat tracks that were a minute or so long, and that's what I use for our podcast music. You can do whatever you want. You can go to like Epidemic Sound or one of those companies where you pay like a subscription, you know? What I would recommend more is trying to work with a musician, like a SoundCloud artist or something like that, and you can collaborate and you can network that way, and you can still get dope music, you know? But make sure that your shit is actually royalty-free, or if it isn't royalty-free, that you've got it figured out with whoever owns the rights, you know?
Yeah.
But, I don't think there's very much more to that one.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much just make sure if you are using, no, don't use any music that's not yours. You know what I mean? Try to use royalty-free music. It's the best. It's the easiest way to, first of all, make your podcast sound better and smoother. And you won't get copyright striked, or, you know, you're not going to be giving away like your earnings.
Yeah, for sure. And so that brings me to the second most important thing aside from the equipment, which is recording platform. Now, there's 100+ recording platforms for podcasting. The best way to do it, hands down, is to record in person and record it straight to the computer, you know? Yeah. That way the sound isn't going over the waves and being processed and then coming back to the computer. We record over Skype because we don't record in person yet. Our goal is to record in person, but right now we're just not able to make it happen. And Skype is pretty good. It's not great. I wouldn't record a platinum album over Skype, but it's good enough to get. It's way better than a phone call, you know.
Yeah. And we've tried other ways. Like we also tried Discord, and out of all of them that we've tried, I think Skype was the best because you can also like, it's really easy if you're gonna like a guest, you can say, hey, what's your Skype name? You know what I mean?
Yeah, very user friendly.
Yeah, and
everybody knows Skype.
Exactly. Everyone trusts Skype and everything, so it's not anything sketchy. But yeah, I mean that was the easiest for us.
Yeah, I've seen people record. I have a Mac, and I've seen people record on GarageBand, and it's super easy, and you just boom right into the computer. But just kind of reiterate, we're not in person. So if we were in person, we would probably just record straight to the computer. The fewer times that your voice is processed by whatever platform, the better. You know, because the way Skype processes our voices, then I put it onto iMovie, which processes our voices. You know. And then I'll even take the audio from iMovie, put it on GarageBand to create an audio file or to trim the audio file, and then I'll put it on to our podcasting platform, which is that processes it again. So the fewer times you process it, the better, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, a friend of ours, Benjamin Hayden Levitt, he made a video about Zencaster, which I guess is a great one. I'm not sure if it's free. You might have to pay a subscription. But for us, like I said, there's a bunch of ways to do it. But for us, everybody just knows Skype. It's Old Faithful. It's pretty good. It'll get you decent quality. And also what I like about it is if you're recording like a YouTube video like we post on the YouTube platform, it gives you like avatars, and when you talk, it kind of lights up, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it gives you kind of a cool MP4 version for video, you know, instead of just posting an audio file and then a picture. It actually gives you some animation of your speech, because like when I speak, my side of the screen will light up, and when Mad speaks, his side of the screen will light up in the YouTube video. So we got all that shit worked out on YouTube, stuff like that, but we still haven't told you about releasing it onto podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever that you listen to podcasts. And this was remarkably easy for us. We use the Anchor app, and you're probably used to hearing the Anchor ads in our podcasts. And honestly, the ad that we do doesn't pay us very much, but I'm kind of just doing it as a practice and to get our listeners used to hearing an ad break, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, even before going like that far, you can say how like Anchor gives you a free ad. You know what I mean?
Yes.
What was it again? It's like 10 cents per every like 1,000 listeners.
Something like that. I mean, it doesn't pay you very much. It's maybe a penny per view that you get on the podcast platforms. It doesn't pay you for YouTube, you know?
Yeah.
And what's cool about it is it gives you a chance to practice recording an ad, and it gives you a chance to see your episodes distributed to all these different platforms. So basically what you do is you sign up for Anchor, Anchor.fm. It's an app. And we recorded our first few episodes on the Anchor app on a phone. And that's fine if you're in a pinch, you know, if you're on the road or in a hotel, or I don't know, you can record. It provides you versatility where you can make a podcast from your phone, which is awesome, you know. But there's limitations to it when you're on your phone.
Yeah.
So we don't actually record into the Anchor app anymore. We make the files on our computer and then put it into the Anchor app. But there is the option that you can record straight into the Anchor app, which is great, you know. And the Anchor app, you can also, if you have a guest download the Anchor app, you can record remotely with multiple guests. I think it's up to 10 people in like a party chat, and you can record the whole party chat, boom, right into the app. So when you create your Anchor account and you get an episode up and publish it, it'll take about a week, but you'll get onto Google Podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, a whole bunch of other smaller ones. But it's like every major podcast network, within about a week, your podcast will be up and running, you know?
Yeah.
But if you make a mistake, like in your caption or in your episode or something, it'll also take maybe a full business day when you edit the caption or whatever for the change to actually happen. So make sure that all your shit is correct. Everything's spelled right in your caption, because once you publish it, if it's spelled wrong, if you go in and edit it real quick, it's not an immediate edit on all platforms. But it also provides you analytics. Like you can go into the Anchor app and you can see, like I'm getting plays here and on this platform. You know, you can get an idea of who's watching your podcast, how big your audience is. You can even see like what countries they're in, and like what platform is playing your podcast the most. Like you can see how much Google played it, how much Spotify played it, how much Apple played it, blah, 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 blah. You know? It just makes it really easy, puts it all in one place. So, and it's free. So I'm not trying to pitch Anchor. Like the Anchor is not paying me other than the Anchor ad itself that we do in the middle, you know, and it pays me like literally 1 penny every play. I'm just saying this is what we used, and it made it very easy for us. There's probably better options because Anchor's free. It probably has limitations. There might be other paid things that are better, but Anchor's been great for us. I mean, I don't really know what else I would want out of it, you know?
I mean, you really did a good job of summing it up, but yeah, Anchor's, it's just kind of like, you're like, it's throwing the seeds for you, you know what I mean? It's throwing it on other platforms for people to maybe like catch on to or pick it up. It was nice, but I don't know.
What?
Like well, cause I'm trying to think of like back in the day when we just used Anchor app, it felt like it was like holding us back. You know what I mean? For some reason, but like then we like got onto Skype. I mean recording wise, like right now.
Yeah.
Like it felt like it was holding us back, but like when you record on Skype, it was just really easy. So I heavily suggest Skype for recording, but then Anchor for distributing.
Yeah, for sure. And you wouldn't really, there wouldn't be a situation which you could use the Anchor app that you couldn't use Skype because you need internet to do both, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and you can run Skype from your phone as well. So unless you're like, I have to get this thing up now, I can't process it, I can't, I don't even have time to get it on the computer and cut it, then boom, Anchor app straight into the app and then up, you know.
Yeah.
But it's nice to have the option of being able to record right from the Anchor app, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's distribution, and that'll bring us into one of our final talking points, which I mean second to final one, which is getting guests. And this could probably be another podcast. I say that so fucking much. I should stop saying that as often as I do. This could be a whole another podcast. But getting guests it's important, but I don't want to stress it so much that you lose sight of the heart of your podcast,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
Because go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, like the last two ones go kind of hand in hand. We have a social media and then getting guests, and I think the easiest way to get a guest is through social media. You know what I mean? Unless you have like a mutual contact, and along with just getting guests, I would only get guests if it helps your podcast. You know what I mean? Because the guests that we've had so far, we find interesting to us. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So that's why we're like, oh, let's give them a platform to tell their story to not just us, but to everyone that's listening. But if you have like a podcast where it's like learning how to farm, you don't really need a guest for that. You know what I mean? Especially if it's a farmer talking, he just tells you what to do. But we like to talk about things that are interesting to us.
Mhm.
So we'll have people who own gyms, or we'll have people who worked in prisons, and we just think that's like cool and like interesting. So that's how we decided to have guests, and yeah,
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even though guys like that you didn't mention, we've had several guests, and
yeah,
all of them have an individual story that we found to be interesting on some level, you know. And you can say, well, it's because they had a following that's larger than ours, and you're not wrong. But the reason that we found them is because of their following, and then
yeah.
we found them interesting, you know.
Hmm.
So yes, they had a following, but we wouldn't. There's people that have a huge following that we have no interest in having on the show, you know.
Exactly. Yep, that's a great point.
So it's got to be. You have to find the person genuinely interesting. Otherwise, it's going to be a shit interview and a
Yeah.
shit episode, you know.
Yeah, I always try to get guests that I feel like I'd be friends with in real life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, every
Keep,
single one of our guests I could totally shoot the shit with and have a beer with, you know.
hmm for
So
sure.
make sure that I mean sometimes it's good radio if you and the guest don't mesh well and you get in an argument or whatever. I've seen like talk shows where that seems to happen and they get a lot of views. I don't really tend to enjoy that, but
Yeah.
I mean it's kind of clickbaity on like, news anchor blows up at guest, blah blah blah. I mean,
Yeah.
I get that that's a thing, but just also make sure that if something like that does happen on your show, that could possibly define your podcast, and then you just become known as the podcast that this happened on,
Yeah.
and then no one cares about the rest of your content.
Hmm. Like your podcast gets labeled as like someone that's trying to get you on there to kind of like a gotcha podcast. You know what I mean? Just
Mhm.
wants to like incite like a fight for views.
Yeah, and I mean if that's your thing, whatever, but it's definitely not ours,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and with the guest thing, don't be afraid to reach out because the worst that's going to happen is they don't respond.
Exactly. And
So
then like I don't think anyone would be mad at you for asking. You know what I mean? Because you're
yeah, and
literally
if you're
just saying like,
polite,
hey,
especially.
yeah. Because the way we go about it is like, hey, we love what you're putting out. You know what I mean? If they're a YouTuber or like a musician, we'll say like, we love what you're like putting out. We have a podcast and we'd love to have you on. You know what I mean? Kind of talk to you about like maybe your journey to where you got to where you are now, or like the process of making a video. And like usually they'll say like, yeah, I'm sure, like why not? Because a podcast is easier than like making a collaborative video where we're
Mhm.
just it's like a hangout. You know what I mean? We're just chilling right now and like just talking.
We're taking the work out of their hands too, because they don't
Exactly.
have,
Yeah.
like you said, it's not like a video where they have to record, cut, and then send us something. It's like it's just a phone call, you know. So I think it's easier to get podcast guests than it is to like collaborate video wise.
Hmm.
And it should say something. You should say like, it's not like, hey, dude, I have a podcast, come on. You should say
Yeah.
like, hey, I found you this way. I like what you're doing, especially this video, or I liked what you said, blah, blah, blah. So they know that you're legit watching their content and you value them. You don't just say, hey, I want you on this podcast. Because then they're like, oh, they're just wanting me on to build a following,
Yeah.
which isn't untrue necessarily. Like, yes, I want you on because you have a following partially, but I also genuinely find you interesting because I
Yeah.
watched this episode. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for
Like,
sure. I mean,
it's not untrue. Like,
yeah.
yes, I do want you on partially because of your following, but like, again, there's people with huge followings that I would never want on the show because it would just be, I just couldn't make it work, you know?
Hmm.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Them having a following is more of like a benefit. We never seek out because of their following. We mostly seek out because like they're interesting. But if they also have a following, it's also kind of like it's a plus. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It gives us more of a chance for people to find us through them on their side.
And then just some bonus ones. Your last talking point is social media, and I'm going to let you get into that. But
Yeah.
be careful that you're not posting content just for the sake of posting content. And that's kind of YouTuber fairyland. Like, make sure it's quality over quantity. But at some point, you got to put out content. I understand. There's going to be some episodes that are not as good as others, but just make sure that you're not just sitting down with no talking points and you're like, all right, got to do an hour today. You know, have
Yeah.
some ammunition when you sit down behind the microphone. And we've had at least one or two episodes where we recorded the whole fucking thing and went, that was ass.
Yeah.
We're not posting it, you know?
Yeah.
So just make sure that you've got some talking points, because we went into some with like some talking points that we thought might be okay, that we weren't super excited about,
Hmm.
but it was relevant at the time and ended up being shit.
Yeah.
So even if it's relevant, make sure that you're excited about it,
Yeah.
you know?
That was gonna be like another thing I just thought of was kind of like one thing you also want to do when making a podcast, or the best thing to do, is listen back to your own podcast, and you can go, okay, so that part was awkward because I did this, or like that part sounded bad because of this. So like recently, I've been listening back to a lot of our podcasts, and I realized that I sound kind of like sleepy, even though I've been awake for like an hour or two. So I've
Mhm.
kind of started to like wake up and like drink water immediately to kind of like refresh my throat, and then kind of like go out and get a coffee. So I kind of like, first of all, I'm forcing myself to go out, you know what I mean, become awake, and like getting the coffee to like stay awake.
Hmm.
And
I
it
didn't know
really
that.
just, yeah, I mean, just because like I feel like I've been sounding a lot groggier in some earlier podcasts, and it's like
Yeah.
I think that sounds like shit. You know what I mean? If I clicked on a podcast and someone was kind of like, "Hey, what's up, guys?" I'd be like, "Fuck that! That guy doesn't care." You know what I mean?
Yeah. The
Um,
energy and the voice is important to the podcast.
yeah, it's very important. Um, so yeah, I mean that's kind of the steps that I've taken, just kind of waking up, going outside, just kind of like becoming awake. You know, you don't want to just crawl out of bed, move over to your PC and like hit record. You want to make sure that you're into your own conversation. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You want to be the podcast that you would want to listen to.
for sure. Yeah. That's another t-shirt. We got
So I
mad
mean,
t-shirts,
seriously
bro.
though, that's like people that like if you make podcasts and if you don't go back and listen to them to see the quality and to see what you can change, I think that's a big problem, and I think that's something that everyone should be doing. Um, just kind of just
Yeah.
quality assurance. You know what I mean? You don't want to be
And when you
recording
listen,
trash and then forcing it down people's ears.
my bad, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I
But
got you.
when you listen to your own podcast again, it's so much different than just speaking,
Yeah.
because you don't realize what you sound like when you're speaking. It's weird. When you
Mhm.
listen to yourself, it's like you said, oh, I sound groggy. Oh, I need to do this. Oh, I need to do that. And by listening, I listen to it. I have to, because I'm the one that edits the podcast, you know? So I get to hear like, oh, this, I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't do that. And you are listening to them when they get posted, you know?
Mhm.
So then every episode becomes better. And I kind of wish that maybe you do, I don't know, because you can get the raw recording straight from Skype. If you listen to the uncut version, it might even be better because you're not hearing the stuff that I've cut out on the YouTube version, you know?
Yeah.
And so every podcast gets better and better and better when you listen to yourself because it's practice, you know.
Yep.
And it's just like I've heard some people like Joe Rogan has recorded so many podcasts that he is on cruise control at this point. He's just so good at it, you know.
Yeah. He can just talk and like that's a podcast. You know what I
Or
mean?
like Alex Jones can just talk and talk and talk and talk with no teleprompter by
Mhm.
himself in a room and just go. And I'm not saying I agree with what Alex Jones says, but you got to respect the way that dude can speak and speak and speak and speak and be interesting, you know, for hours.
I've always said this, like, you know, I don't agree with Alex Jones, but he is a showman and he
Yeah.
is good at his craft. Um, so pretty much that's kind of what you want to aim for, you know what I mean? Just kind of just being ready, because those guys have done like so like they've done like thousands, right? Joe Rogan's done thousands of interviews, and
Oh
then
yeah.
Alex Jones has done like thousands of videos. So at this point, they're just kind of it's repetition for them. It's second nature.
Hmm.
So I mean, that's kind of what we're striving for. I think listening back to ours, I think we're like very ahead of it compared to like you know what I mean where we were at the beginning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's because like the steps we're taking. You know what I mean? We're watching videos on YouTube like how to record a podcast better, what software to use that's better. You know what's like
Hmm.
we're kind of just like we're kind of like what's the next step every time we make another podcast, and like we're trying
Right.
to expand more and more and more every single podcast. And
So
I think doing that really will change your way you look at podcasting, and like will change kind of because you are also running a business, you know what I mean,
hmm
by having a podcast. I think
be
if you want to do
marketable.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. If you want to do a podcast, make sure you're not just putting sounds in the airwaves, you know what I mean? Make sure that you are trying to get better and that you're trying to put out good content.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me around to what will probably be our final talking point just for the sake of time is watch podcasts that you want to be like in terms of success. You
Yeah.
know, I'm not saying be just like the H3 podcast or be just like Joe Rogan. They're already doing that. There's
Mhm.
already someone doing that. You can't do it again, you know.
Yeah.
It's probably unwise to try to do it again. I don't know. You might be able to do it again. But watch someone that can command attention or speaks confidently or is interesting and be like, oh, how does he speak? What's the body language like? What's his meter and his voice? You know, things like that. I'm not saying replicate it exactly, but you can learn from that. Sometimes it'll be someone that I don't even like,
Yeah.
but I understand the talent and I know that I can learn from it. You know, so find someone that speaks well or the way that you want to speak or is able to speak to guests that are far more famous than them or something, but do it confidently. Good interviewers, you know, watch those people, figure out how they speak and learn from that, you know.
hmm
That's
Yeah. I mean,
kind of what
that's a
I do.
great way of summing it up.
I mean, a good place to start is I say this so fucking much, but a good place to start is honestly the Joe Rogan podcast. He speaks to so many different people that like you'll find out how to interview a rapper, you'll find out how to interview a football player, you find out how to interview a scientist. Like he talks to all these different people and he's able to change his interview style between them, you know.
Yeah.
So
Um.
especially if you're going to have guests, his is a fantastic one to learn from.
Yeah. I would say listen to like a handful of podcasts, but make sure that they're all different. You know what I mean? You don't want like to be listening to the same genre of podcast. You want to make sure that you are listening to different like different like shows. You know what I mean? Like because
Hmm.
most of the ones that I listen to are like either interviews or like YouTubers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But before I started this, I was kind of listening to like all different kinds of podcasts to kind of see like who I want to emulate. You know what I mean? And
Right.
who does it the best, and like who you kind of like what you said, like the listen to the podcast that you want to be similar to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like who like you like their style, and like you want to like kind of not replicate it, but kind of like you want to take that same energy that they have and kind of like implement it into your own.
Yeah, like a really solid one. I think I mentioned it earlier. That is just It's one dude, no co-host or anything like that. Is Chris D'Elia. His podcast it's hilarious, and it's just him. You know, super
hmm
high energy. I watch his maybe once a week or so, and just to see his energy. You know, how does he talk to his? He talks directly to his audience. You know, he calls his audience his babies. He's like, "What's going on, my babies?" You know, so he's speaking directly to his audience. He maintains this very high energy throughout the entire podcast, you know.
Yeah.
So I learned from him in that way as well. you know?
Yeah, for sure.
So what did we cover? We got content, like what's it about, choosing a genre,
Mm-hmm.
figuring out if you're going to do it by yourself, a co-host, a team, maybe more than 2 people. Figure out your frequency. Is it going to be once a week? Is it going to be twice a week? Is it going to be once a month? Is it going to be 10 times a day? I don't fucking know. But post as often as you can, maintain a good energy and passion for recording, and keep producing good content, you know?
Yeah.
Then we got equipment. Don't bankrupt yourself. Set a budget. Stick to your budget. I guarantee you, anything $50 or over, you're going to get a decent sound, you know?
Yeah.
Recording platform, we use Skype. There's probably better ones in terms of quality, but Skype is just universal. It's the old faithful. Everybody understands Skype. You can get a guest from wherever the hell, and if they have a smartphone, they can use Skype and you can record it, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Music, make sure it's actually royalty free. Kind of self-explanatory there. Distribution, we use the Anchor app. You can use whatever you want. Getting guests, ask everybody. Everybody you think, you mean the worst they're going to say is no or no response. And you might just fucking get them on the show. You never know.
Yeah.
Last talking point with social media, just make sure that you're not just posting on social media. Hey, new episode, you know, and we find ourselves doing that just because we're busy. We're working jobs and it's hard for us to give the individual attention to all the platforms at once, you know?
Yeah.
But your social media posts should be interesting, independent from the podcast, you know, because they don't know why they're clicking on the podcast. Like just saying coming soon or podcast out now isn't necessarily interesting for the sake of itself. You know, it needs to be like, if you're building an Instagram following, you should be like legitimately trying to build an Instagram following and then announcing your podcast. And we're honestly not very good at that. But it's just something that I've noticed, you know? Yeah, with social media, just make sure you're giving them all the individual attention that they need. Maybe it means that you don't have all platforms at once. Maybe you just start with one, you know? Just make sure that you're giving them all the individual need. I kind of gave it a rundown. You got anything else, buddy?
No, I mean, that was it. That's pretty much it. That's what we talked about. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you guys, if you guys want to DM us on Instagram or on Twitter or our email, it's all at the official Purgatory Podcast at gmail.com. Give us any questions. Maybe if you guys have an interesting story, we could interview you guys. Or if you guys want a topic for us to cover, I guess. But yeah, make sure you guys reach out. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, tell your friends, tell your fam. Keep tuning in for your weekly trip to Purgatory.